people talk about diversity very much as a buzzword, right? Oh, let's have diversity. What is diversity?
One key shift in demographics has been the shift towards Gen Zs in the workforce.
For the next generation, be it Gen Z, they want to know that tomorrow I can wake up in the morning and see somebody who is a senior exec, who is a business leader, or who is implementing product A, B, and C. I want to be able to know that I can do that, my children can do that, my children's children can do that, because we lead by example. So the more diverse organizations tend to be, the more talent they will attract.
We've seen quite a lot of behavioral difference in the way candidates who are, Gen Zs versus the rest. I think it's for good. Hello, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to all of you, back again with a next edition of Hyreo Rise series of podcasts, where we talk to talent experts from the space of human resource, employer branding, sustainability, diversity, and different aspects of HR being discussed in Hyreo's, different episodes of podcast and webinar series. Welcome all of you. Now, today we have a very, very interesting topic and a very, very interesting speaker with us today. Now, we're going to delve a little bit into employer branding and how do you make employee branding an effective tool for talent acquisition. This is the subject that we're going to handle today. And I've got with me a very, very interesting panel to speak on the subject. A warm welcome to you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining us on the session today. To kind of introduce Jennifer for the rest of the audience, she comes with over 2.5 decades in HR, talent acquisition, in sustainability, in diversity. She's a co-author of 2 books. She's been on the on the list of top women inspiring leaders from Nigeria, from listed by People Hum. She's been awarded, Award of Excellence by the African Women Industrialization Award, one of those awards. Just a few things. I can go on and talk about Jennifer for the next 5 minutes. She's done quite a bit of stuff, interesting pieces of work. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being part of this session today. And as we talk more about employer branding and how does that impact the way we do talent acquisition in today's context. Thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Cool. So let's start with, employer branding and how this has evolved, right? Now, we've seen, a lot of changes in the way organizations are looking at branding themselves, and especially when it comes to, employer branding, talent branding. I'm pretty sure a lot has changed over the last few decades. As somebody who has witnessed this in the context of Europe, in the context of North America, Africa, Middle East, how do you see this, overall employer branding being perceived by corporations, and how has that evolved really in the last few years?
It's really evolved, I would say. First and foremost, what I really noticed is that every region has their own way of attracting talent. And what I've seen over the last couple of years is it's not been so robotic. It's been a lot more strategic. I think that it has evolved from just, seeing, somebody has the right technical skills, let's get them in for an interview and hire. They've now seen it as more of a strategy-led methodology. So I've seen that organizations are being very, very particular about the kind of talent that they want to acquire. I've seen culture play a large part on identifying talent. So not just is this person technically right for our organization, but what kind of culture, what kind of personality can they bring to the team? So I've seen the strategic part of talent acquisition, especially with organizations coming up from small to medium organizations that are becoming major players, and they're competing with national giants. So we've seen that the scrap for talent is there. It's become a very competitive market, which has made organizations have to be very, very innovative in terms of attracting talent. Whereas, a few years ago, we're just dealing with the larger organizations. Now SMEs with backing from joint ventures and investors and startup funding, we're seeing the innovation coming into talent acquisition, which is giving the larger organizations a run for their money. So I'm seeing that, innovation is playing a big part in talent acquisitions today.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, Jennifer. I think if I was to summarize, the way organizations are essentially changing their pattern of branding with respect to the change demographics, with the change business climate as such, and how do you get top talent, which is extremely competitive today than ever before. I think organizations who are doing that, more of as an art, I think is going to kind of benefit literally out of it, because there's a lot to be done differently than it used to be. Now, let's take a step back, Jennifer. Let's look at employer branding from a candidate's perspective, right? Somebody who's not within the organization. And fundamentally, you're trying to make sure that they become part of the journey, right? So let's look at it primarily from the perspective of a candidate's decision, and how do they view organizations through the prism of, the brand that they create, literally. How do you see that? What's that? How's that impact? How's that defining the decision from a candidate perspective?
Okay, so from a candidate perspective, you're now looking at things from back to front. So candidates, they have the skill set, they have the demand, right? They have the demand, and as candidates also, they are supplying the demand into the market. So they're becoming very selective about the organizations they work for. I mean, there was a time where it was really much money driven, very much, salary and remuneration. But as what we're seeing now is that it's about that work-life balance. It's about that, it's about the ability to grow within an organization. It's now about, where can I leverage on my skills in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years? So even candidates are being very much more selective about the organizations that they're walking into. So for what does that mean for employers? What that means now is that employers have to be able to create that environment where candidates can thrive. So candidates are not just looking at, are you a multinational? Or how many offices do you have? It's now, okay, what kind of systems do you have in the organization that can allow me to grow? What can I bring to the organization? How can they support me in my career progression journey? So from an employer branding perspective, they have to now look at candidates as how do we buy them in? How do we bring them in? So what does our culture look like? What do our systems look like? Again, bringing it back down to innovation. With the employer branding, what they now need to look at is, am I an organization for the future, or am I an organization for the here and now? So the whole operations now change in terms of, am I a candidate? What is my short-term and long-term goals? Candidates are now looking at their career in a more strategic way. So it's almost like strategy meets strategy from a business perspective, from a candidate perspective. They're looking at, how can my skill set benefit this organization? But at the same time, how can this organization benefit me? So candidates are now looking at themselves as a commodity. They're looking at themselves as a business within a business. So now from an employer branding perspective, do you have the right system to support this particular candidate on their journey? So candidates are looking for organizations now that can assist them with their growth. It's not about the names anymore. It's not about the big names. It's all about, what capacity can this organization help me grow? So you will find that candidates go to interviews now with a lot more precision. It's not just answering questions about the organization. Candidates are starting to realize that as much as I want to work for this organization also needs me. So what can you as an organization bring to me that will support me in delivering what you need to become a market leader? So from a candidate perspective, they're being very, very selective about their next move. If a candidate is moving from another role, you'll be surprised that they have thought it through within the last 6 months to a year. They've literally planned it through. They've researched, they've looked at organizations that fit their career aspirations. They've measured up what larger organizations are doing to the smaller organizations. They are actually doing that research. So what does that mean for an organization? It means that if you're trying to pull in a certain type of candidate or a certain type of talent, you as an organization have to realize, who are you marketing to? And does it match with the kind of candidate that's looking at you? So it's become very much a dialogue between the employer as a brand and the candidate who is also a brand who needs you to be able to support them on their journey. So it's becoming very much a strategic transaction.
Right. A couple of very, very interesting points that I heard. I just want to kind of highlight on them as I move to something that I really had as a list of questions that I wanted to kind of ask you as well. So I think that shift that you mentioned where, talent is really looking at their career long term and, things are moving away from the brand angle to it or the compensation related decisions being made by candidates. So we're talking about, trying to showcase the brand as such. And this has got a lot to do with the whole storytelling angle with respect to how do you market yourself as a brand. Now, and I think, and this was a question that I had as a follow-up to that is, in terms of your experience directly or what you've seen around, you have something to share where, companies have got it really right in terms of getting that storytelling piece really well, in terms of the brand, in terms of the culture, in terms of what they have to offer, in terms of what does it mean for external talent in terms of their career, that specific aspects of where you've seen things really work well, maybe a few examples, how does that really played out well for organizations from your experience, any geography that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, across various regions. What I've seen is that organizations have been very intentional about data collection, about consumer insights, and knowing exactly what their key talent are looking for in terms of, as I said, career growth, in terms of, exactly how they want to be seen in the market. So they're spending a lot of resources on things like advertising, on things like CSR, corporate social responsibility, to be able to tap in that they're not just an organization who is looking to reap revenue, but they actually care about communities. I've seen, especially within the international development space, I've seen campaigns that are driven, even though they are recruitment focused, but they are serving an ongoing problem. So for example, I've had a client where they've done a community drive within rural communities, trying to educate people on environmental problems, sustainability problems, and how they can be able to impact that in their local communities. I've seen them do workshops, training, I've seen them, give resources to, less deprived organizations and very much publicize that in the media. So what does that do? What that does for the brand is that they've been seen as an organization that is not just about making revenue, but they actually want to use their organization and their products and their services to solve an ongoing problem. So what you're doing is that you're not just, so your brand is actually very 360 universal. You are bringing in talent in to nurture, to solve an ongoing problem. Whereas, for example, in some sectors, it may work not so great. So for example, maybe in an, maybe like an alcoholic beverage industry, right? It might be a bit more strategically tough because, yes, we are taught to drink mildly or drink wisely, but then their kind of strategy in bringing in talent will be completely different from an NGO perspective. So I've seen from an FMG, as I said, from maybe an alcoholic beverage, tap into people who are in the media and, entertainment, where, they work more with influencers, people that they respect, people where they love. So I've seen it work in various industries by understanding who you're trying to target, understanding the demographics. For example, what might work in the Middle East may not necessarily work well in Europe, may not necessarily work well in countries where the socioeconomic dynamics is very, very versatile. So I've seen organizations capitalize on what's going on in their region and use that to draw out people who want to make an impact. So a lot of talent acquisition strategies are very impact-led as opposed to consumer-led. So depending on which angle you want to come from, I've seen organizations thrive from both perspectives. So some organizations have worked on trends and jumped on those trends to attack talent who have driven those trends forward. And I've seen organizations who have used impact-led, sustainability problems, using SDG goals and how to impact that through their own product and service and attract talent that way. So I've seen it work in various dimensions. And again, it still goes back down to, it's people that drive processes, that drive productivity. So once you have the people on board who have that passion to drive the process, it will automatically lead to the productivity, which will then retain and develop talent.
Yeah, I think that was a brilliant point. I think if I was kind of, weighing it from different angles, I think the key of what you said is, firstly, organizations really have to have that purpose-led operations. Are you really contributing back to the community? Now, obviously, telling that story to the audience is a very important and critical part of it. But I think if you're fundamentally a company with solid value system, fundamentally somebody who's giving back to the community, how do the products that they make, how do those products impact the society by and large? And if you're trying to kind of tie this together, excuse me, and make that story compelling, I think you might end up getting the right talent for the kind of positions that you're trying to hire, right? And I think the example that you took from a company which is trying to do an alcoholic beverage, all the way to an NGO which is trying to attract talent in a completely different realm, and how they relate to the audience, specifically to what they are doing and how effectively they're actually making those contributions, I think that's a huge part of it. And again, something related to that again, which I feel, Jennifer, is a lot of research, a lot of data points have come across in terms of each of these sectors or segments of industries benefiting from diversity. Mm-hmm. Now, it's been proven both in terms of the productivity, both in terms of getting the right product at the right time, or meeting numbers. Whichever way we look at it tactically, strategically, diversity has really helped organizations of all sizes across the world, right? Mm-hmm. Emerging markets, very large markets like North America, we've seen impact of that. Now, do you think diversity as a process, as a function, as a thought process behind diversity, do you think that's impacting the way employer brand and the way talent perceives brand? Do you see that also as an impacting factor?
Most definitely, 100%. Because the thing about, people talk about diversity very much as a buzzword, right? Oh, let's have diversity. What is diversity? So diversity can be, it's a very broad topic from gender, from, sexual orientation to, diversity is very, very broad. Now, when we're talking about employer branding, and we're talking about diversity, it's about a complete representation of the world at large that should be seen in every organization. Like what we're seeing very much now is a lot more women in leadership. We're seeing a lot more, women of color. We're seeing a lot more women of diverse religious backgrounds. That really much impacts your talent magnet to an organization. I want to be able to look at an organization as a workforce and see somebody that looks like me. I want to walk into a organization and see a culture that I can imbibe or that I can embrace. It's very much about a true representation of not just the physical representation, the technical representation, and also to express how diverse our world is. And from an employer branding perspective, you're seeing a lot of, you're seeing it a lot in various industries. You're seeing women in tech. You're seeing, you're seeing women in various industries coming together so that representation can be very much at the forefront. Even if you look at TV adverts, especially within the UK, you are even seeing a lot more diverse advertisements. So that in itself is an organization showing that we are not a rigid structure and just working on what a stereotypical organization is supposed to look like. Organizations need to think about the future of the economy and the future of their business at large. And they have to see that their consumers want to see a representation of themselves, which means that you need to attract talent that is going to be a representative of that consumer. And in terms of organizations growing, if you really want to be an impactful organization with innovation, these are the different talent pools that you need to pull from to understand how they work and how they function. So, for example, if I'm trying to sell, a specific kind of dish, right? If I have a restaurant and I want to serve, I don't know, for maybe a dish from the Caribbean, for example, and I would need, for that authenticity, to reach into a community who can understand that dish, how it should be prepared, how it should be served. I mean, who are our consumers? Our consumer doesn't necessarily have to be from the Caribbean, but because that's the dish, you'll be able to give us some kind of insights that somebody from, I don't know, from North America or from Asia or from Nigeria wouldn't be able to give. So if you want to have a diverse organization that's a true representative of what you are actually putting into a market, you need to be able to pull those insights from various different, technicalities, backgrounds, so that not only physically is your organization diverse, but the technical data and the consumer insights you will get is also diverse. So that's what I feel that organizations are leaning towards in terms of diversity, in terms of, from a technical and a more of a nurturing perspective, but at the same time, for the next generation, be it Gen Z, they want to know that tomorrow I can wake up in the morning and see somebody who is a senior exec, who is a business leader, or who is implementing product A, B, and C. I want to be able to know that I can do that. My children can do that. My children's children can do that, because we lead by example. So the more diverse organizations tend to be, the more talent they will attract, because they're seeing that they're open to having a demographic that is truly a representative of our nation.
Yeah, brilliant. I think I can't agree more to the fact that the organizations have to first have that culture of diversity ingrained, and as you rightly said, it's a very, very broad topic, and there are a lot of nuances of how when you talk about diversity per se. But I think firstly, organizations needs to pick that as part of their agenda, as part of the way they operate, not just in HR or human resources or talent acquisition, but take a broader view at what's my audience, whom are we selling our product to, what is the diversity in that, try and imbibe that, who's my consumer today, how is it going to change tomorrow, make it part of that whole evolution of how the brand needs to be perceived as an open environment for diversity. I think it's a very, very brilliant strategic point that I think not just HR leaders, but I think even executives in organizations should probably keep in mind. And as we talk about this, one key shift in demographics has been the shift towards Gen Zs in the workforce.
Yeah.
Now, probably this is that first time in human history where you have such a diverse sort of talent, and one significant part of that workforce today are Gen Zs and millennials and all of these different talent groups coming in. And many research have shown the effectiveness of Gen Zs in slightly different ways than some of the earlier generations, for example. How do you appeal to them? How do you communicate brand story with them? And what have you seen in terms of what works and what doesn't work for the Gen Z crowd?
I mean, Gen Z is a very dynamic group. They've even evolved between what we know Gen Z as now and what Gen Z was considered Gen Z, I guess, a decade ago, right? Gen Z of today are more strategic. They're more tech savvy. They are more, they're more streetwise per se. They know their value very, very early. You can't pull the wool over a Gen Z's eyes, whereas before, you were like, it's the big company, the glitz, the lights, just wearing that uniform, just having that badge, that was Gen Z 10 years ago. Gen Z now they are a group of people that not only do they know what they want very early, they actually know how to go about getting it. So in terms of trying to appeal to them, first and foremost, don't insult their intelligence. First and foremost, because they know their data, they know their numbers. They're very, apart from being very tech savvy, they're a group of people who are more about what I can do for you. So they already know their value very early. So to attract Gen Z, you need to meet them on their level where you're not insulting their intelligence, but show them at the same time that we are the tech for the future. So you need to show them that you're innovative enough for them to want to give you their time. So, and how is that impacting employer branding is the fact that, you're seeing organizations do a lot more of social media recruiting, because that's where you will find Gen Z. You will find them on your Instagrams, on your TikToks, not so much on your Facebooks, but, they go by, influencers. They are driven by, the latest softwares. They're driven by, innovation. So if you're trying to attract someone in Gen Z, you need to tell them that you understand what's going on in their world. You need to show them that you understand not only what's going on in their world now, but where they can take their knowledge in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. So that's first and foremost how you're going to pull them in. Now, how are you going to keep them? By keep on staying on top of trends. You have to show them that you know exactly what's moving forward. So, your Gen Zs are talking about your AIs, your machine learnings, your data. They're talking about your business intelligence, your market intelligence. Someone Gen Z of today, that's what they're coming with. Whereas Gen Z 10 years ago or 15 years ago are just saying, okay, I got a first class in biology and I got I've done this course and that course. Now it's more than that. It's more about what did you do after that? So a lot of the Gen Z that are coming into the market now, they're coming somewhat ready-made. But in order for you to be able to keep them, you have to show that you're ready to move with the times. So Gen Z now, they don't really thrive so much in overly structured environments. As an organization, you have to be ready to step outside of the box and be unstructured, but within a structured environment. Because you've got to also understand that Gen Z have been sitting in the classroom for 3 years, 5 years. They want to get out into the world and make money, but they want to bring the innovation that they have picked up, whether it's personally or socially, and bring that into the environment. So if your environment is too rigid for them to be able to thrive, they're not going to survive in your organization. And that's why you're seeing a trend where some Gen Zs don't stay in organizations more than 2-3 years if you're lucky, because they feel that as an organization, you're moving too slow for them. So in terms of your organizational structure, in terms of your work culture, if you are not imbibing today's lifestyle, like maybe finishing early on a Friday or having more wellness days or having more employee engagement benefits as an employer brand, you are definitely going to lose this pool of people. These are people who within organizations are having pizza Fridays, they're having networking events, they're going on retreats. They have a pool table in the middle of the office where if they feel like they just want to, take a 10-minute break or 15-minute break to clear their air, they've got somewhere. These are the kind of environments that you need to keep a certain group of Gen Z. And even if you're in an organization that doesn't really have that kind of space or structure, then you have to have employee benefits that pull these this talent pool in. So if you're an employer who is trying to, captivate Gen Z, you really need to look at the kind of employee, policies that you have in place, incentives and benefits. You need to ensure that they are relatable to the Gen Z of today's time.
Wonderful. I think I can relate a bit to that, Jennifer, because, we, as a company, we focused on, helping large enterprises in their talent experience journey, in their, recruiting automation journey, improving that talent brand story in the market with talent. And we see thousands of candidates who goes through our system every day. And we've done a little bit of internal research to kind of see how does the overall product adoption itself, is with different age groups or different groups of talent that we're seeing. And as you rightly said, they're quicker. They want quicker information. They're tied to things they get tied to things based on how the whole thing is perceived by others as well. Like you said, influencers or others who are, seeing the brand in a certain way. We've seen quite a lot of behavioral difference in the way candidates who are, Gen Zs versus the rest. I think it's for good. And I think a lot of technology and a lot of adoption of AI in talent and HR as a function essentially is required to catch up with this sort of changed demographics in a quick amount of time. And I think the only way we can sort of stay in touch with them, as you rightly said, is going to be in the space where they are active. And that means a lot of tech. And that's in a lot of ways helping us as a company, because we are finding kind of resonance in the way some of these demographic dividends pay out in the HR space. But I know this has been an interesting conversation so far, but I'm also cognizant of time, Jennifer. I know we have to kind of wrap this up, but before we close this, Jennifer, I want to kind of take like top 2 or 3 things that you would tell HR leaders who are passionate about employer branding, who would love to pick that up as a function for their organizations. It could be somebody who's already investing time and effort into it. But if I was to ask you, what would you say to talent leaders, top 3 things to keep in mind in today's context from an employer branding perspective?
Okay, I would say, talent leaders, HR managers, to be very multifaceted. So you have to act as a business partner to the organization and be a thought leader to the people. You have to be able to know how to marry business needs with consumer needs, which some can find it easy to do, and some is an actual natural skill. So, some people find it as a natural skill, and some you have to really train your mind to do it, because as much as you want to see the growth of the organization, an organization can only do well if the people are doing well. So it's to also understand your workforce as it is, understand the culture of your workforce, understand the people who you want to bring in from a talent perspective, and understand how their technical skills and their personality skills will actually help to form a formidable team within the organization that can take the business to where it wants to be. So learn how to kind of understand your consumers in the market and your consumers who are in the organization as well, because your consumers are not just the people that buy into your product, but the people who actually work for you are your consumers. Because if they are not happy with your environment and the culture that you are producing, they're going to leave. So your consumers are actually your employees as well as, your actual external consumers. So it's learning how to marry those 3 people: your external consumers, which are the people who are buying into your product or service, your internal consumers, who are your employees, and then the overall corporate business objectives. Learning how to marry all 3 of them. I would say that's number 1. The second one I would always say to HR leaders is to always keep your finger on the pulse in terms of technology, but don't let technology override your business that you forget about the people, because it's still people who built technology. And no matter how much robotics or AI or data or machine learning, no matter how much you want to automate stuff, it still takes people. People still want to have that personal feel. So I would say that people need to marry the 2 and be conscious not to overly technicalize everything, so that you will lose the personable feel, because talent buy into people. People buy into brands when they're represented by a person as opposed to an object. So organizations need to learn how to balance out technology with the people-centric approach. I would say number 2. Number 3, I would say is, keep an eye for expansion opportunities. So don't just look at your market as, your market. Okay, I'm operating in Europe, I'm operating in the Middle East. Try to think outside of your region and understand how that region works in order to infuse them into your business. So for example, what might work in the Middle East will not necessarily work in Africa. Now, even within Africa, what works in Nigeria may not necessarily work in Ghana, may not necessarily work in Kenya. So what I would also implore leaders to do is, whether you are looking to venture out or not, see how your product will be packaged and received in other nations, so that, since every economic cannot be stable and you do tend to branch out, you're already aware of how that regional works. And that's how true expansion works. Look at how you can trade with either your competitors, not necessarily your competitors, but understand what your competitors are doing in other markets and how can you adapt that into your own market. And if you were going into their market, how would your product be received? So don't stay narrow-minded because you're only operating in one region. See how your product will be received in other regions as it is. And if it isn't received, fully packaged as an off-the-shelf product, what can you do to tweak it to fit into that region? Because what we're seeing with businesses is that they're expanding through not necessarily having a physical presence, but through strategic alliances. They are breaking into regions that they wouldn't normally break into because they're partnering with organizations that already have their foot on ground. So they're leveraging on that other organization's intel of that region with their product. And that's how companies are, especially with SMEs, are slowly branching out into other areas where you don't necessarily see their physical presence, but slowly but surely you start to see that product being recognized in that region without a physical presence there. And that's why if you look at various sales departments, they have channel partners, they have distribution partners, but they may not necessarily have a physical presence in that country, but they've leveraged on strategic partnerships to push their brand into a region that they don't even have a physical office in. So HR leaders need to start thinking like salespeople and say, okay, how can I get our brand into that region, be it through, talent acquisition, through remote working, or could it be partnering with another organization? How can we leverage on relationships to be able to build our brand outside of our region? So I think HR leaders need to be a bit more innovative in terms of strategic partnerships, not looking at, other HR professionals or other organizations as competitors, but more as strategic partners.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point. I think the nature or the kind of evolution from being inward looking into outward looking in terms of expansion of talent, expansion of markets, expansion of supporting businesses beyond the immediate area of operations and the kind of the people angle that you spoke about. Although you might have a lot of automation, and technically automation is more to augment you with better data, better decision making capabilities, and you, as long as you're leveraging technology as a function of time or effort optimization and data aggregation, I think a lot can be done by HR leaders. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I mean, in the last few minutes, I tell you, it's been fantastic to have you on the podcast today. Hear your viewpoints, and I believe this is one of those sessions where I think we heard a very, very diverse sort of views coming in. Right from how you would look at it from North America to like in Africa to like a Middle East. I think this is the way I think the future will hold for HR leaders as well, because they're not just brand ambassadors internally, but they're also going to be brand ambassadors externally. A pleasure to have you today, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your time, and would love to stay in touch and create content that our audience would love in the future. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
It's been a pleasure, Aaron. Thank you for having me.